President of Long Range Planning and System Development.
I'm Vice President of Finance.
Randy Brewer, Senior Manager of Maintenance.
Lisa Darnall, Vice President of Transit Operations.
Tom McVeigh, Fire Age Technical Advisor to JTA.
Robert Alford from Rod Cassell on the outside legal counsel.
Bill Mosley, Director of Legal Services, JTA.
Teresa Lynn, Contracts Management Officer, JTA.
Robert Raymond, Safety and Emergency Officer, JTA.
And if you all could please introduce yourselves.
George Herrera, co-founder and chief executive officer with Nopetro.
Jack Locke, Chief Operating Officer of the company.
Walt Bucels, Chief Financial Officer.
Andy Salcinas, Vice President, Construction.
Ed Hart, Manager of Natural Gas Supply.
Myra Urbano, Controller.
Scott Keith, Regional President for BB&T.
Vaughn Alexander Agency.
Tim Curry, Director of Architecture and Planning for URS Corporation.
Mark Ellis, Maintenance Design Group.
And Dylan Nos Corporation, DBE.
Reginald Gaffney from Northwest Support Services, DBE.
Matt Kenyon, President of Dana B. Kenyon Company.
I'm Harry Frost, Senior Project Manager with Dana B. Kenyon Company.
Jared Hightower, Vice President of Sales for Angie Energy Systems.
John Barker, Sales Manager, Angie Energy Systems.
Bill Lee, Miller Electric Project Manager.
Mike Scribbins, WWA Vice President.
Obi Umana, Owners Corporation, DBE.
Lucas Clary with Clary Consulting, Financial Consultant at JTA.
Thank you. I'm going to make note of the time, and after that, you will have 30 minutes for your presentation. And then following your presentation, there will be 30-minute time slot for questions. And then after that, there will be 30 minutes to have if you have any questions about the contract. The time is now 1:08, and you have 30 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, I'm George Herrera. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Nopetro. We couldn't be more excited to be here today to embark with you on this initiative to bring compressed natural gas fueling infrastructure to the city of Jacksonville with JTA. You are truly embarking on a landmark project that will change the community forever. What you're doing here in executing this project through a public-private partnership is so incredibly wise of this agency, and I applaud you for your efforts. With this, in this project, I've brought with us our entire team, as you can all see. And two of our main partners, which I would like to speak for a moment, is Mr. Matt Kenyon, President of Dana B. Kenyon, as well as Tim Curry, Vice President of URS.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Kenyon, President of Dana B. Kenyon Company. My grandparents started this company back in 1944, so 70 years ago, and we're still here, and we're real proud of that. We were invited by Nopetro to be a partner in this project because of our extensive experience with fueling facilities. We've done a lot of fueling facilities for CSX around the country, and we recently finished one for UPS here, a gas facility, which was, I think, one of the first ones in Jacksonville. So there was a lot of answers to questions around permitting and code and all that kind of stuff. And we'll go into that a little later in the proposal. We also have extensive experience with City of Jacksonville agencies doing projects. We did 2 hangar projects for JAA recently out in Cecil Field over the last 5 or 6 years. And we're recently awarded a contract with Jacksport to do a design build on their intermodal container transfer facility. So we're familiar with the contracts for the city. We've developed a strong local team made up of WWA, Miller Electric, as well as many other subcontractors and vendors who are local. And again, we've worked with both of those companies for upwards of 70 years. So we have a good, solid working relationship with them. Got a strong DBE team that we've actually exceeded JTA's requirements in that regard. We're real proud to have Onus with us as well. And we have developed a strategy to deliver, to minimize the impact on your operations in this, and we'll go over that in further detail because we understand that's the most important thing here. You guys got to operate, and you got to do it safely. And we have we're real proud of the program we've put together. We look forward to sharing that with you. And I give you my personal pledge. Do our very best to meet our obligations to you.
Tim Curry, Director of Architecture and Planning for URS Corporation. We are a publicly traded multinational company with 5 offices in Florida, including here in Jacksonville. And we consider it a privilege to be on this team with Nopetro. We're working on several projects with them now. And we also look forward to continuing a relationship with Dana B. Kenyon on this project as well. Joining us on the design team is Maintenance Design Group, an international leader in transit planning and maintenance facility design. We look forward to working with you folks, and I just want to say it's a special honor to be before you all, and we echo the commitment that Matt has offered already to do everything in our power to make this a success for JTA.
So in terms of the team, as you briefly heard from our two main project partners, unlike your typical project where you're just building a CNG fueling facility, JTA is truly here taking it to the next level by asking for a true turnkey comprehensive public-private partnership to both update the maintenance facilities but also bring the CNG infrastructure, both private and public. And to do that, we've brought this world-class team here together with over 100 years of CNG experience. On the design side, complementing URS is the world leader in maintenance facility modification designs and MDG. And one of the critical components of all our projects, something that we embrace in all the communities which we partner with, is a strong DBE and local commitment. In every project, it is critical to the success of the overarching objective of bringing CNG infrastructure to create economic productivity, create economic stimulus in every community that we are in to help promote the overall goals of every project. And so to do that, we brought on one of the largest local DBE contractors and proven in Onus Corporation. And with us today, we have Mr. Bendelli with Onus today for that purpose. In addition to that, we brought on Northwest. One of the critical items as well is taking it to the next level. And we're actually going to create a mentor protege program here with JTA through the SBA, where we're going to be able to prepare a local company to be able to now develop and build CNG fueling facilities as we expand out of the state of Florida. And in addition to that, as our partner Matt described earlier, we brought on all local subcontractors, companies that are working with us in other areas of the state on our projects there as well. And then finally, one of the more critical elements is the CNG equipment. As you all know, the heart of any fueling system are your compressors. And for this project and for all our projects, we only use CNG Energy because they are the preeminent supplier of CNG fueling compressors. And we have with here today both Jared and John from their company as well. Some of our prior P3 experience. So we were founded here in Florida in 2007. And our vision was always to begin developing infrastructure throughout the state of Florida by forming public-private partnerships with counties, cities, transit agencies, and school districts. Over the last 7 years, we have secured every major P3 CNG project in the state of Florida. We've got Leon County, Charlotte County, St. Johns County, Osceola County, and recently Lynx Mass Transit, which is the Tri-County Transit Authority throughout Central Florida. And in all these projects, we are implementing a very similar solution insofar that we're developing the fueling facilities as well as the maintenance infrastructure, all under the P3 approach. Some of the elements of our prior projects that we're implementing here in the state of Florida, we developed the nation's first P3 for CNG fueling in our state's capital. We design, finance, build, operate, maintain the entire infrastructure. And critical to that project and to all our projects is 100% redundancy. And 100% redundancy not only with the CNG equipment, but with the natural gas commodity and all the way through transportation. And those items are paramount in any one of our projects as we develop them throughout the state. And then finally, one of the true interesting or unique qualities of our firm is our unparalleled ability to market, fuel, and develop third-party sales. Walt will touch on our success over in Tallahassee in doing so, but part of that approach is really creating a strong local team, just like we did on the construction side, proven experts that can help us complement our own internal marketing team to penetrate specific areas within a community. So specifically, we've looked at having the Alexander firm working with us here in JTA so that we can penetrate both the community so that all of your transit riders, all the constituents can truly appreciate the benefits of operating and traveling in these cleaner, domestically operated buses. And secondly, to help penetrate that third-party marketing sales so we can, at the end of the day, reduce your price per DGE, because that's what's going to effectively occur on royalty sales. So with that, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Walt Sells.
Thank you, George. There are a number of financial matters that we won't get into detail today that you'll see in our price proposal next week.
and we would not want to be disclosing those in public until you see our price proposal next week, including the recent addendum that came out, that additional information concerning our company and so forth. But I do want to give you an overview of Nopetro's financial structure and financial capacity that's relevant to this project and all of our projects around the state, as George was alluding. First, our structure and capacity. The company was founded, as George said, here in Florida in 2007, incorporated in Florida, and we operate fully under Florida law and are very conversant with all the issues, particularly with the public sector. The 7 P3s we've already won and others in the pipeline as well, fortunately. And so our company is set up, focused on this business that you are now going forward, hopefully with us in the not too distant future. In terms of structure and efficiency that I think is relevant to you, let me just give you a couple of salient facts. We are privately held. It's a private company here in Florida. 5 board members, 3 are here today, the 2 co-founders and myself, and the other 2 are CEOs of 2 of the largest, most successful, multi-generational family offices in the Southeast, both headquartered here in Jacksonville. Both very private, wonderful people, and those 2 CEOs are the other 2 board members and significant investors in the company. And I can tell you they have the capital capacity, as we'll share with you next week, to do this and many, 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 many more around our state in the Southeast going forward. But that said, what's the gold standard for public sector contracting, as we note here, is full performance bonding, which we've included in our proposal. And performance bonding, not just for construction and all associated requirements and expenditures, but performance bonding for operations and maintenance. Something that I think, if we were not the first, we were close to first, with some of our first 3 P3s in Leon County and Tallahassee. So the gold standard for government is performance bonding. No questions asked. Something's not working right, you call the bonding company, you get the money, and things go forward. And so that's how we are set up here. In addition, your RFP is excellent. It taps every potential element of a successful P3 that can drive additional savings faster for the JTA. And that's the objective, additional savings faster for JTA. So we have searched and included, for example, BB&T, and I'm glad the president of BB&T regionally, Scott Keith, is here with us today. Someone that already works with JTA, managing investments and other functions. Large presence here in our hometown, my hometown anyway, and around the Southeast. Over $1.1 billion in outstanding tax exempt lending to Florida local governments for vehicles and equipment. Unparalleled capacity, expertise, and experience going forward. For fuel price risk management, particularly useful and important here, whether it's diesel or natural gas or gasoline, very, very important. We've chosen to include Bank of America Merrill Lynch, the national leader in fuel price risk management for transit agencies. So they provide those services for many years now for Links in Orlando that recently awarded us their P3, for MTA in New York, for Washington, D.C., all around the country. Experts, proven, understand the public sector. So we've brought them in on our team, and you'll hear more about that in our proposal next week to handle those services. So we've put together all the resources to optimize every element of our P3 proposal. George alluded to third-party sales. This is our Tallahassee operation. The blue is our public sector partner gallonage so far this year. The red are our third-party sales at that station so far this year. We have over 10 different private sector fleets our sales and marketing team has persuaded and sold to begin the conversion. Every one of those gallons saves even more money for our public sector partner. And we're looking forward to putting that same expertise here. You saw the letters of support in our proposal from these and many other major local fleet owners we've already reached out to and have ready to go with our model for third-party sales. With that, I do want to turn it over to Ed Hart, our natural gas fuels manager, because natural gas is a very important cost component that can be managed to your benefit.
Thanks, Walt. We've put together a proven, reliable natural gas
supply chain deliverability for JTA. We have the commodity side and the transportation piece to think of when we move natural gas from the wellhead to JTA. And we have world-class partners. We have a super major that will deliver the commodity. We have the pipeline infrastructure, of course, already in place with Florida Gas Transmission and TECO, People's Gas here. And I've had 30 years experience in doing natural gas supply from producers all the way to Fortune 500 companies. And this supply package with the major that we have involved and with firm transportation will get gas to where we need it. One of the things that Walt touched on was risk management, and risk management is important to us. But next week is the pricing proposal. We'll go into more detail with that. But one of the savings that I can talk about right now quickly is that when we've put together in the state all of the stations, we are going to get the benefit of volume aggregation. And part of that volume aggregation, of course, will result in lower supply costs for JTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And now let me introduce Andy, our Vice President of Construction, talk about the project.
Thank you, Walt. As you all heard earlier, George alluded to, we're not only a design-build firm, but we also own, operate, and maintain some of these facilities. And with me are both Mark Ellis and Tim Curry of MDG and URS, and Harry Frost of Dana B. And as you can see, and this is pulled up directly from the RFP, we tried to set up the 8 work zones that we felt would impact the totality of the project, and so how we would identify them and make them, visible for you and explain the thought process and the design going into that. So I'll turn it over to Tim and Mark to go through specifically each and every one of the zones as they relate to the project.
Yeah, Mark and I represent probably 24 design professionals who've already contributed to scoping out this work and putting together the zones that we're going to be looking at. The work zones are not intended to be sequential. They're simply intended to sort of characterize the work in different geographical areas on the plan itself. The phasing plan that Harry will be discussing and refining over the period of the project will actually be what determines what the sequence is. Mark and I both understand that the frustration of designers in a short period of time like this is to try to take you quickly through what we've been working on for the last several months, actually. But we're going to try to hit the high points. But overarching, the high points that we're going to be presenting is, our wanting you to know that what we have repeatedly heard JTA people say, and what we've read in the documentation you have given, is that site security is is really a high value to you as an organization. Circulation on the site, maximizing the parking and overall safety of the site are also extraordinarily high values. And we have to keep this site operating while construction is going, so we need to minimize disruption to your current operations. We, as designers, also think that this is a major project that's going to be impacting the community. So to the extent that we can make this a positive impact to the local community, improving the streetscape and the accessibility and the way the intersection at the light there at Forsyth and Myrtle are experienced, we want those things to come through our solution as well as a betterment. So not only JTA and their circulation, not only your third-party payers and users of the facility, but also the general community at large. So Mark's going to start us off by going through work zone number 1.
So before we start on that, I just want to say something about MDG and maybe asking why we're teamed with one of the largest design firms in the country. It's that we dovetail really well with URS. Their professionals could obviously design this with their eyes closed, but we bring the operational, the functional, the real-world experience of designing transit operations and maintenance facilities to the table and dovetail with our firm. And we're doing that all across the country. Los Angeles Metro is one of our major clients. We're doing all the planning for redevelopment of all their facilities. So let's talk about Work Zone 1. One of the big things that we have to do here is figure out how to park buses as we're adding infrastructure, we're adding new facilities to your site. It's already very tight, and you're utilizing the site very well, but we're adding more buildings and more infrastructure here at the site. So looking at efficiency and circulation, new ways to park, expansion of parking areas, try to minimize the overall impact of these new facilities from a parking standpoint is really the goal of the modifications in Work Zone 1.
So Work Zone 2 is basically where, as George referred to at the opening of the presentation, the heart of the station. This is where we will house all the equipment, both the compression equipment, the standby generator, the meter station from TECO's People's Gas, and so forth. And so in that equipment area, secured behind a concrete masonry wall and fenced in, you'll have three 300 horsepower compressors producing roughly 2,400 SCFM with additional infrastructure in the ground for that second phase for the additional fourth compressor as time goes on and as the station and the public ramps up. And so the arm you see extending to the north to the existing, which is Work Zone 3, the existing fueling site, that's where we intend to either trench or jack and bore the lines out to that site. The jack and bore option would obviously minimize the impact to the circulation of the site, but of course that would be in coordination with the underground structures that are there. That some have been identified thus far, and so it would be a matter of just coordinating that work to be able to, again, minimize the impact to the operation on a daily basis.
So we're going to briefly go through Work Zone 3, 4, and 5, which are modifications to the current facilities on the site. The bus wash fuel service building, very unique design, very unique roof structure, naturally ventilated building. And the nice thing about it is that we think we can add the CNG dispensing systems without major modifications to the islands themselves. There's a formality to transit fueling and the operation of the service cycle that we want to maintain and keep in operation as we're making these modifications. Nice thing is we have that opportunity. Work Zone 4, gosh, I wish we had an hour to talk about this building. There's going to be some upgrades to this building related to code. The extent of those upgrades, what we have to do is going to be based a little bit on our discussions with you guys and with the code officials about exactly what you're doing in that building. The codes have evolved since they came out 15 years ago, and they've evolved and gives us some opportunities to do some more innovative approaches to how to ventilate the building and the modifications that might be required. Well, we're probably looking at methane detection and lighting upgrades, things like that. We have pits in this building, don't look like they're going to pose a problem, but it may be a code-related issue to some of the pits as we start modifying the building.
From a construction perspective, the work in the existing facility, one of Dana B. Kenyon's core competencies is working in facilities in coordination with your all's folks, operating on a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week schedule. We collaborate with you, understand what's important to you, and work around your operations to make sure that we are minimizing any impact to you. One of our most recent projects is out here on the west side of Jacksonville at the UPS facility. Matt alluded to it earlier. We perform many of the same types of work there that we'll be performing here in coordination with their ongoing operations. We completed that work in a 60-day time period. We had no lost time accidents, and very proud of that project and look forward to bringing what we learned there to you here on this project.
Work Zone 5 is the PM facility modifications. Again, you have to understand exactly what's happening in that. Initial blush says that potentially there's some opportunity not to have to upgrade as much in this facility because of the type of maintenance going on in that space. But we will work closely with you and the code officials to fully vet what we have to do to that building.
Public access station is been designed to fit on the one of the two options that you gave in the RFP. We looked at the area that's currently occupied by the present building and determined fairly quickly that to maximize third-party sales, we really needed to provide a larger station that provided more room for turning actions of large equipment. And this plays right into what Walt had presented earlier in terms of the success of the station in Tallahassee and the benefit that everybody's received from the third-party sales. In our particular case, we have provided the 2 dispensers, 4 lanes for initial service, and then provided an additional 2 lanes for future. The position of the station itself has essentially been determined by 3 criteria. Number 1, the gradient on the ingress route here and what it takes to get up with a major truck and with a trailer, and then making the 90-degree turn from that drive into the station itself. And we had to move it back a certain distance for the grades to work out correctly. The second thing was the presence of a 72-inch storm line that was a sleeper that we found and have determined that from our perspective we didn't want to build on it, and we chose not to relocate it, which could have, either of those could have happened, but we felt this gave the best flexibility to the JTA going forward in the future. So that was the second criteria. And then the third criteria was the actual turning radius here coming in from the deacceleration lane that we're providing here off of Myrtle to get into the station itself. As part of this work zone, we'll also be filling the detention area there along Myrtle and enhancing with the lawn and some low plantings so that the area gets spruced up but still have good visibility for all the people using the station.
Work Zone 7, the north parking lot where the paratransit fleet will be parking. Some of the upgrades that we're envisioning there would be some formalization, some upgrades to the access point at that location, some security upgrades to that entire parking area, some stormwater infrastructure improvements and paving. And then we'd love to work with you guys throughout the entire site, but specifically in this area to increase the parking capacity of that through maybe some innovative parking approaches. So we're looking forward to working with you on that as well.
You have 5 minutes.
Work Zone 8 is the south parking area. And again, we have the existing building, ad building here that's scheduled for demolition. We intend to excavate that further, taking out the footings, foundations, etc., to put in exfiltration that will replace the capacity of the existing ponding area, as well as the additional impervious area that's going to be a part of the new design. There's a unique collection and diversion structure here that we haven't determined yet whether we can reuse that or if we're going to replace it. If we replace it, it'll be a very similar kind of a structure, taking into account the 2 ways in which water is being taken care of on the site right now, getting it to holding or detention, as well as getting it to off-site drainage to the river. The GTA has done a remarkable piece of work in terms of past design and permitting, and we see very little change in the way stormwater is being managed on the site right now with the proposal that we have on the table right now. In the end, we believe that the site will be an enhancement and be an encouragement for third party to use the site and give us an opportunity for signage for the vendor as well as for JTA, noting their presence here on the corner.
From a scheduling perspective, we took a look at in detail at the project and plan to maximize the benefit to JTA as early on in the process as possible. We plan to start within 30 days of mobilizing on the site. We'll renovate, provide the upgrades to the existing parking facility lot. We'll next move to the north parking lot, which is the old Osteen site. That will permit us enough time to get the administration building demolished so that we can flow then into that area, perform those parking upgrades. In the meantime, we'll be doing upgrades to the existing facilities. All that work will take place and be completed, including your private fueling station, within 365 days of notice to proceed. We'll then move into the public fueling station, which will be completed as per the RFP in the 575 days from those proceedings.
Thank you, Harry. And so just to briefly mention on the O&M side, Nopetro maintains and operates these stations in-house with our own personnel, not just with boots on the ground, but we also are able to monitor these systems from remote locations, i.e. either the office in corporate in Coral Gables or even from our laptops. But more importantly than that is the intent of moving our director of maintenance here to JTA and basing him out of Jacksonville, not only because of its geographical location, but because of our response time as per our RFP to maintain those 4 hours of response. And so in order to do so, we collaborate obviously not only on the equipment side and the manufacturing side with CNG Energy Systems, but we also rely on them as our tier 2 support for many things. So with me here I have Vice President of CNG Energy Systems, Jared Hightower.
Thank you. What you've seen throughout the program today is a real focus on not interrupting your operations and offering the best-in-class solutions throughout the proposal. That is true for the equipment supply in this case. CNG Energy Systems has been in the business for 31 years. That's compressed natural gas fueling business. Our equipment is all made in the United States. It meets FDA Buy America without any special changes to our processes. We're in 24 plus transits in the United States, and we're North America's largest supplier for CNG equipment. We routinely provide backup to Nopetro. They're the lead on the project. They're providing the operational excellence. But we have a 24-hour call center. We have parts availability at our factory and also through our suppliers.
So with all that, ladies and gentlemen, in sum, we couldn't be more excited for this opportunity of being able to partner with JTA and create the benchmark for transit industry fueling through this public-private partnership model. What truly separates us from anybody else in this industry is our attention to detail. We are your partner, from the design side, pre-construction, to the operation side, to the marketing side. We are here in and out. We will never, ever, we're not going to build a facility and take off. We're going to be your partner, and we're going to focus on every level of detail throughout the entire process. And once operational, that same attention to detail will continue. We'll be your partner, and we will be here for the long haul. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We can proceed with the questions.
I guess we're in the Q&A segment here, and if you would please elaborate on your coordination plan with TECO for gas services, and have you confirmed that TECO can supply the minimum gas pressure required by your proposal design?
Right, so I'll take a partial stab at it and then we'll follow up with Walt and Ed. So most recently, as of just last week, we actually have been meeting with them, and last Friday we did meet, and we have confirmed that they will be able to supply our minimum pressure, inlet pressure necessary for the station. Right now we're looking at 120 PSI, and absolutely, so the idea is to have them come in and perform their infrastructure and get it down to Church Street and then down to the site where we're going to include the master service regulator for the station. So Ed has some more, or Walt perhaps, either one.
And as Andy said, the answer is yes, extensively at headquarters in Tampa, and we've identified opportunities within their tariff structure for a situation like this that'll be beneficial to JTA, and that'll be disclosed in our price proposal next week, but there'll be a full description of that element of the integrated solution here. But short answer, yes. We spent a lot of time at headquarters being sure everything was good to go.
Thank you.
Based on your technical proposal, you indicate experience, your experience indicates one completed station. I know that's a little misleading. So if you describe your team's experience on similar CNG facilities, and how this experience will be integrated into the design, build, and operation and maintenance periods of the project.
Sure. So essentially, the equipment itself, the process that occurs in Tallahassee is exactly analogous to what occurs here from a design and a functional standpoint, the system itself. So what we're doing now is effectively training David to move over here in JTA, so he will be responsible for the entire operation. He has over 15 years of experience. He used to oversee Tempe West facility, which is a full natural gas fueling fleet out in Phoenix, Arizona, fueling over 300 buses on a daily basis. He joined our company in 2010, and we are relocating him here to JTA to be headquartered here and effectively control the operation from Jacksonville. So that's what we're coordinating that effort.
Nopetro is a reasonably a new company with modest financial assets, how would you best describe your ability to meet the long-term financial commitments under this contract, and how you can best convince us, and there are no financial risks at all, convince us?
Sure. So I'll give you my answer, and then I'll hand it over to Walt, who's got significant experience sitting on that side of the table from the government's perspective. And so, at the end of the day, one of the gold standard of securities are performance bonds, and we're bondable up to $20 million. And so that in of itself will provide any sort of security, both from a practical and a perceptual standpoint, that should alleviate any of that concern. In addition to that, the fact that we have our equipment manufacturer and operator too, because they do operate some stations out of the Midwest in CNG Energy, the independence of that organization truly creates a great deal of more security for you all, because if, God forbid, that scorched earth scenario were to occur, well, you're able to pull that performance bond, which is all the security you need financially, and then hand over that station to someone else that can operate it, which is independent of Nopetro. And so that is a great additional security that you have to alleviate any of that risk that you addressed.
Yeah, but treat this question as a neutral question. It's not something.
Of course, right? And we've gone through this process, as you can imagine, with a number of agencies in Florida, and provide the security necessary. And if Walt, you want to add to that, please feel free.
No, that's it. It's 7 other governmental bodies across the state have been through our financial information. We'll provide additional information as requested next week, and pass this with flying colors. And I'm confident the information we provide about the capacity of our owners collectively is really, really big. And so we'll have information that, we're private too, but confirms that. But it's the performance bonding for both O&M and construction that is the gold standard in government contracting in Florida. There are plenty of examples of very large companies that a dispute broke out, litigation broke out, and even though they had the money on the balance sheet, somehow the money never got to the local government. We've all experienced it in public service. The performance bond is first and foremost the most secure in our experience. But
thank you.
Yep.
George, just a quick follow-up. Is the $20 million, is that single project or aggregate?
I'll turn it over to Amy. I believe
it would be single at this point, and because Tallahassee's operational, so it would be a single in this case. We would be bonding this project for $20 million. Thank you.
Who is responsible for O&M expenses for equipment after manufacturer's warranty expires?
Nopetro.
Now, Randy, the consumables at your part of the station, that we will modify that to make sure that that island still has the same use of the consumables, your oil, transmission, all those DF. You guys handle the consumables at your fuel facility.
Just to follow up on that, the equipment is estimated going in for 15 years.
The equipment has a 30-year life cycle in terms of what it would have in the full depreciation schedule, even though it probably would last longer. But property maintained is a 30-year life cycle.
So we shouldn't anticipate anything having to be replaced at least before 15 years. Because I think the O&M contract, is what we put in the RFP was for 15 years.
So during that 15-year process, there will be some major overhauls that occur, which we intend to fully finance as part of the P3. So in no way during those major overhauls of the equipment of the specific components would we actually be asking the JTA for any of those funds. I mean, that's really at the crux, the benefit of the P3.
Those are based on hours. So depending on when we reach those hours, the manufacturer recommends those overhauls.
And
if I can speak to that.
Sure.
So the first compressor that we delivered similar to this was in 1989 in Utah, and it's still operational. And we have many compressors in transits all over the U.S. and even export markets where we have tens of thousands of hours of operational time. So there is maintenance that needs to be done, but the asset is a 30-year plus asset properly maintained.
thank you. And you had mentioned that on-site O&M personnel would be somebody you would bring over from Tallahassee who obviously has been working on that project there. What is the on-site response time for anything that happens?
Sure. So from a contractual standpoint, if I recall correctly, the homing to it was a 4-hour time frame. But the reality, the more practical answer is they're next door. I mean, they're on call 24/7. So you know, from a reliability standpoint, our facilities don't go down. They will be there within 45 minutes in any prior case.
We maintain an emergency fueling continuity plan, and in that plan, there's a team, there's bodies of teams that are aggregated in the moment's notice for that. And so the on-site personnel is the first responder, the communication through the SCADA system and the CP400, which allow myself to receive it, you know, our chief of operations to receive it. So we respond, the response time is almost immediate, really, before we have somebody on the ground to be able to come and see it. So that's the idea, is to have him here in Jacksonville for that purpose.
Questions? Awesome. Can you have any other follow-up questions?
Yeah, I would want to see if you have any concerns that would basically affect adherence to your proposed schedule. Any items that right now you see that would trouble us as we go along?
I guess outside of the current extension that's been given, so our proposal, the chart and the milestone advances that you saw in the write-up was based on that. But given that month of extension, we would push that out a month from the days you see there. And as far as anything significant, I think Tim's team has had the opportunity to vet a lot of the drainage and storm drainage permits that are existent for the Osteen property, or that were at one point, and as well as what you all have, and what the city is doing with their off-site drainage. So we don't really see much more than coordination, more than anything. But as far as permitting goes, we don't foresee anything to be in the way of the development.
Do you see opportunities to
improve that schedule?
To improve the schedule in case something else comes out elsewhere?
I think there's always that opportunity. There's always that opportunity in moving things in a parallel path and doing things concurrently. And so there's always that opportunity. And so, as you can imagine, we give ourselves some conservative dates, just because we understand that we have to vet this through the building department first.
It's that close coordinated effort of us being here as well that can expedite that process as well.
One of the powerful features of the public-private partnership model is all of our capital is at risk until the station goes into service. We have a chance to begin getting our capital back and perhaps making $1 when the station goes in service. I assure you that the station will go in service as soon as it is possible. And similarly, if there is an outage or a perturbation with some of the equipment, anytime it's not working and a third-party vehicle pulls up, that's a gallon of sale we might lose. We do not like losing sales because we have a chance to make a little bit of money there too. So all the incentives as between you and us are perfectly aligned. We want it to go in as quick as possible and to work perfectly all the time, because that's where we have a chance to do well on our capital at risk. So we're in the same place.
Milestones, right? We have the on-site one.
Correct.
And then third party.
There's the 365-day, and then there's the third party, which is the 500%. Right? And to elaborate on one point Walt just made, which was on the presentation, and I didn't touch upon it, but there's the redundancy in the station. So as to avoid any downtime and curtailment from anything down lines of power. These are electric-driven compressors. We have included a 1.25 megawatt standby dual fuel generator that will run both facilities, meaning not only the public station, but your all station, as well as the ancillary loads for the bus wash, the maintenance building, and so forth. Now, we also understand you do have generators on site now, but at the time, the RFP called for those loads, and so we've taken those into account. That being said, there is a tremendous amount of redundancy there, both from a compression standpoint as well as a electrical power generation standpoint.
Go ahead.
We will be ready to fuel the first day Gillig can get a bus here.
Gillig can get a bus here probably sooner than our schedule allowed.
Well,
we've already had to push out the production, but we're already on their production schedule.
Outstanding.
So there won't be any issue.
Yeah, we've been coordinating. We all know them, of course, and they will not get ahead of us.
We just don't want buses sitting here for too
We don't
long.
want them either.
Oh.
We won't be.
have a question. As far as the design and construction, how we ensure that all the applicable codes are met and design and construction approved by the appropriate agencies?
I'll turn that over to Mark and Tim, but I think first.
Yeah, you can advance it to.
Yep. I'm going to pull up a slide if you all don't mind. It's just for his reference here. Is this good right here, Mark?
Yeah, that one's fine. There's a host of codes that apply to this, and what they did in Tallahassee and what we're doing in Atlanta and what we're doing in Virginia all have different applications of those codes. It's the agency having jurisdiction who ultimately adopts one of these. It could be the International Fire Code, it could be an FPA that's adopted locally. It could be a version that's 2008 or 2006. Most likely it's not 2013. I know I get the book every year, but it seems like no one else is up to speed on that from an agency standpoint. So it's what's been adopted, what the agency having jurisdiction is really looking for in the way of perception management, what codes they've adopted and want to put in place, and how safe they feel the facility would be with those things incorporated. We have a couple of different situations on the site. A fueling facility that by its very nature is a naturally ventilated space. Unfortunately, we have a roof design that's kind of an oddball roof design. Unique, I love it from an architect standpoint, it's cool, but it does pose some ventilation issues for us. The fueling standards, the codes related to fueling facilities are a little bit different than what's for the maintenance building. And so we have to take those into account. I foresee that, the first thing we do out of the box would sit with your organization and the code officials and get everybody on the same page about what we're going to apply to these facilities and how we're going to characterize the maintenance buildings, the two different maintenance buildings, and within the maintenance building. If there's opportunities to characterize one side or another as minor maintenance or heavy maintenance or major, what's classified in the code as major maintenance, those things come into play as well. You're probably going to hear from others that are going to be presenting to you that there's ways to manipulate the perception in the code about the code, and that's not a bad thing. It's just how it's applied. We feel as a team that safety trumps everything, and the perception of safety from your staff standpoint, from the public standpoint, should be the driver. So even if it's marginal that maybe we don't need methane detection because we have attested 4 air changes an hour in our building, we like to make sure that everybody feels comfortable going in that direction. Odorized CNG has its place, but the reality is you get CNG buildup or natural gas buildup in your building to a point where you can smell it at ground at this level, you've got too much in the building. And so we feel like methane detection at the upper levels of the building is the appropriate approach. So, I guess the short answer is we're going to make sure we work closely with those code officials. That's the way to do it.
And let me just say that, we just did the UPS project. It's a light maintenance facility, similar to what you're doing over here, or your facility. And the code officials interpreted that the way they interpreted it, which was basically build a hood system in there with gas detection, ventilation, and so on. So, and we think it was the first time they had seen that. So that was their interpretation. And if we're going to the same people with a similar situation, I don't know that they would interpret it any differently than that. So our conclusion was that we would program that into our project to have to do those kinds of improvements into the existing facility, which is certainly a more conservative approach and a safer approach for your staff working in that.
Real quick, I'll show you that. What he's talking about here is this separation wall, this high separation wall. And the upgrades to that building included ventilation, some upgrades to the ventilation system.
Fireproof, explosion-proof fixtures.
Explosion-proof fixtures, some upgrades to the fire alarm systems and integration of those.
So you're proposing something similar to that?
You know, it could be all of these things. It could be additional things. It really is the judgment of the code officials. We know there are standards out there that we initially looked to, but we want to confirm those with the code officials.
Yeah, let me just be clear. The work zones and the way that we have described description of work and our narrative has tried to indicate that we're prepared to do the maximum based on our understanding of what the codes are. We need to develop a shared and agreed risk. And like Mark said, we're committed to the safest possible facilities. So that's what we've had to assume right now. We couldn't assume that the code officials would make certain determinations, as Mark has alluded to. So what's in the narrative description right now would take care of our understanding of the most stringent of the inspectors or building plan reviewers comments on the project. And you do have two distinct buildings. One, Mark and I believe, would be classified as light service and the other as heavy. And so we do have those two issues that could allow those two buildings to be handled differently. But as I indicated, we haven't just gone to an ivory tower and said, this is what you have to do. We put stuff out there. That there's going to be a whole interaction time here where we determine what the best solution is for JTA. And so that's how this ultimately would be determined with the local jurisdiction.
And we're putting other components on the defueling apparatus that we're putting on the site. Also helps that code situation as well. You have to keep in mind that 15, 20 years ago when CNG first became a viable fuel for the transit industry, most everything was funded by the government, by FTA, at that point. And so the codes were being generated basically out of thin air. They were just saying, well, what do we do about this? Well, it's lighter than air. Well, let's make these provisions. And pressure release valves were different, and there's a lot of things that went into the development of those codes. A lot of experiences happened. There's been virtually no unintended releases that created an explosion situation in a building in the United States related to CNG. So it's relatively a safe fuel from the standpoint of using it inside the building. But we still have to satisfy the perception in the code. So we want to make sure everybody feels safe within that structure. So we'll do what's necessary for what's
Thank you. I have just one follow-up question for you. Do you anticipate the defueling station to be a minimal use station?
Yeah, it could. The idea for the defueling, it depends on what work is going to be done to the vehicle. So the vehicles in of themselves, some of that evolution that has happened to the maintenance facilities and the codes has also translated to the vehicles. These vehicles come off and they have segregation and shut-off valves from the tanks, and so there's ways to shut the system down in the vehicle in of itself depending on how much fuel it has. If the intention is to do a major overhaul, then the defueling would absolutely be necessary, where you would defuel the tanks completely before you drop them, etc. If it's light maintenance, where you're not doing anything to the fueling system or the engine for that matter, changing a light bulb or something along those tires, then in that case, defueling the whole system or the vehicle may not be necessary. It just depends on what kind of service you're going to be providing to that vehicle at that moment. But we definitely have the intent to have the defueling assembly near the fueling islands or near the...
When needed, rather than a regular usage.
There's some agencies that go full board and say, we're going to defuel everything. And I just went to a conference where I met with some folks that they do defuel all of their public works fleet, and they have made virtually no modifications to their building because of that. The problem with that is what happens that one time when someone doesn't do that, and we have an unintended release in the building hasn't been modified. It really puts some issues related to flexibility and how you maintain vehicles into play. So it's a procedural thing. I think you want to use defueling when you can, especially to capture the value of that fuel. But maybe it's the capacity of that. It's not. You don't want to have buses lined up there waiting to be serviced, having to be defueled, because that takes time to do. So I think it's going to be a procedural thing for you guys.
I noticed we have two important banks here, BB&T and Bank of America, which has a significant professional relationship with GTA too. But that's my point. My point is, can you give us some basic information about your approach for the bus financing, which is optional item 9?
Sure.
You don't have to say in details, whatever.
Sure.
Because that will be released in next week's.
So we are doing, So we are doing something very similar in Central Florida with Lynx, where we are leasing them their transit buses, working with our commercial lenders. So that's essentially, so we have absolutely the ability of doing so. And then Walt, you want to add any points to that? Without,
No, we'll have great detail, Henry, in the price proposal next week. But it's based on well-established practice with Florida public sector vehicle leasing, which has been going on a long time, just for some different applications, but tailored for your circumstances and the service life of these vehicles and so forth, from an expert. I mean, they're good at it. It's an area of interest. I'm sorry we don't want to get in details.
No, that's perfectly fine.
We will give you a price proposal on leasing buses, no doubt about it.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, George, the last part of this recorded session is what I consider the most exciting part of the recorded session, and that's the contract.
Okay.
If you were here at the pre-submittal conference several months ago, you may recall our CEO, Nathaniel Ford, was very clear about two directives about this procurement. One is he wanted transparency, which is why we've built in this multi-tiered, public process. And the other is he wanted industry input. And that's why we had an elongated Q&A session. We published our contract documents early on in advance, so every proposer would have an opportunity to ask questions about the contract. We didn't get a lot of material questions about the contract, so what we wanted to do was create an opportunity for each of the proposers to tell us in this private recorded session any concerns you may have with the contract, any proposed modifications you may have with the contract, things of that nature, so we can come back and reflect on whether we've put together a fair and balanced contract. Because let's be realistic about this. You're gonna, if you win, you're going to be striking a relationship with this entity for 365 days plus 15. And we're mindful of that very long-term relationship. So we try to create a fair and balanced contract, but we really do want to get industry input. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but we really do want to hear from you if there are any salient points, concerns, or proposals that you want to tell us, so we can consider those. And if we modify our contract going into the price proposal stage, we will do so in an addendum, and it would be an adjustment for everybody. So again, it's fair, competitive, and transparent.
Sure. So I thought the agreements were very well drafted. I think there are some areas that could be refined in order to essentially capture both parties' interests more accurately. We had actually discussed internally quite a couple of times of whether we should actually, during those Q&As, engage in more substantive discussions regarding some of those major points that we wanted to strategize on with the other attorneys. But obviously, for strategic reasons, we had to step back a bit on that. And so I'm still kind of in that same scenario. However, I can point to sort of three salient issues or themes rather that aren't necessarily legalistic in terms of like we take a position, but rather more one where you all will benefit more and really the team, both parties will benefit more. So the first one that comes to mind is the 15-year contract, yet an obligation to operate and maintain for an additional 5 years. So if I recall correctly, that was one of the provisions in the contract. And not that we have any fundamental concern with that, but we believe that JTA will be better served if the fundamental concern, I'm guessing, was JTA, as they were doing that RFP, drafting it, said, well, these buses have 12-year lives, 15 years. By the time we get that second tranche, if we lease them, et cetera, we'll have a 15-year term, and it makes a lot of sense. Yet, we don't want to agree to a take or pay that goes beyond the 15 years because those buses are holding out. Those buses were bought in year 1 or 2. I'm assuming that's what was discussed. And so the way you can address that and still accomplish the same benefit of having the final successful proposer to operate and maintain that infrastructure where they don't have to sort of take off after 15 years. It's just simply remove the take-or-pay commitment, and we've done this elsewhere. Remove the take-or-pay commitment, yet still keep the reciprocal relationship. And so any fuel that you choose to consume, you would consume from that facility, but there's no obligation to do so. So you can address it that way and still get a 20-year term, because the last thing that any of us are going to want is we're going to have an incredibly, if we're the successful proposer, we're going to have an incredibly successful operation in 18 months. So needless to say, 10, 15 years from now, neither of us are going to want to get off the property. We're going to want to stay there because JTA is effectively paying $1, whatever the price is, based on the actual incremental savings that those royalties create. So you want to have a longer period. It's in both of our interests. The question is just how to structure that. That was one. Another point was the termination for convenience. We completely understand the background behind that, and that's completely understandable. However, for both parties, there probably want to be a more express definition as to how to determine, I don't want to call it damages, but effectively damages if
termination expenses.
Exactly. And just have a very defined way to describe that so both parties know what they're getting into beforehand in a way that's reasonable for both parties. That was two. Another one, which I think just creates ambiguity, which doesn't necessarily need to be, is this sort of concept of rollover take or pay. And I'm sure you all discussed that. It's kind of vague, and so that was one of the points that we can, if we're fortunate enough to be in that position, we could discuss a little bit more substantively so we can reach a mutual accord.
Okay.
So those come to mind, but so those are 3 points. That
and it's important for us to hear this. Now again, we can't make any guarantee that we're going to modify the contracts, plural, but we are going to evaluate the questions and the concepts that have been expressed. And if we make any modifications, it'll be a modification to the contract for both proposers, so everybody gets a fair shot on the same document.
Of course.
But these are really helpful. I do appreciate that.
Thank you. Pleasure.